Hello, my name is Phil Boldt. I did research on the relationship of Liberia's neighboring country, Guinea, and its relationship with its former colonial power, France. I wanted to see if there were any lessons learned with this relationship that could be applied to the U.S. relationship with Liberia. To understand why I thought this research was applicable, first, I need to give you a slight background on Liberia. Liberia was founded by a private group of prominent Americans who formed an organization called the American Colonization Society. Beginning in the 1820s, through the American Civil War in the 1860s, the American Colonization Society facilitated the transport of between 12,000 to 15,000 free blacks to Liberia. The idea was to support free blacks in the U.S. and facilitate the establishment of new colony in West Africa, which ultimately is today's Liberia. Liberia declared its independence in 1847. Over time, primarily in the 1850s and 1860s, the American Colonization Society, the private organization that founded Liberia, faded into the background, and the U.S. government established and assumed a formal relationship with Liberia. In 1862, the U.S. government formally recognized Liberia. In reality, the U.S., without ever even having a formal colonial period with Liberia, became the former colonial power associated with Liberia. Now that we have that background, we're ready to discuss some lessons learned from Guinea. Guinea was a former French colony. Guinea first fell under French control in 1898. At the end of World War II, the European colonial powers in Africa were in the process of reorganizing their governments. France was transitioning from the 4th to the 5th French republics. In addition to reorganizing their own governments, the European colonial powers had to reorganize their overseas colonies. In 1958, France, which was one of the main colonial powers in Africa, gave its African colonies a choice: immediate independence or a continued relationship with France. French colonies were heavily dependent on French technical and administrative advisors for their governments to function. Just prior to the independence vote, the French president Charles de Gaulle, the famous World War II French general, toured the French colonies in Africa and advocated for a continued relationship. Most of the colonies, reliant on the administrative and technical support and advisors, decided to continue a relationship because they knew they were not ready to completely sever ties with Africa, with France. One colony, however, decided that it was ready to be finished with France. This colony was Guinea. When Charles de Gaulle arrived in the capital of Guinea, Conakry, the Guineans were hostile towards de Gaulle and publicly condemned him and France and their past in Guinea. They even tried to embarrass him in public speeches. This slight by the Guineans would not go unanswered. After the vote for immediate independence by Guinea, France acted swiftly. All of the technical and administrative advisors were rapidly pulled from the country. The country began a downward spiral. This was an incident that permanently ended relations between France and Guinea. After the withdrawal of France, the Guineans were on their own and had no technical or administrative support from France or anywhere else. They desperately needed this support because the Guinean government became dysfunctional, even more dysfunctional. Needing the external support, the Guineans turned to the Soviet Union. The Guineans followed a Soviet model of socialism for a while before they transitioned to a Chinese model of socialism. The government of Guinea continued its dysfunction and looked to both alternatingly to the West and East for support. Without a good relationship with a former colonial power or another large country, turmoil can ensue in a former colony because it will try to fill the void from somewhere and alternate looking for a stable method of support. Now, fast forward to 2014, the Ebola virus was rapidly spreading through West Africa. The international community intervened and tried to stop the spread of the deadly virus. International healthcare workers spread through West Africa to assist. One of the countries that required the support was Guinea. A group of 8 Ebola medical personnel traveled to a remote village in Guinea. The villagers, not trusting the government, who had been dysfunctional since the point of independence, were not sure how to receive the workers. They ended up beating the workers and macheting them all to death and threw their bodies in a local latrine. This was a horrible event and showed how much distrust there was in the government of Guinea. This also shows how, when there is distrust of the citizens in a government, it can cause serious incidents which hurt international support efforts in the future. Now, why do these series of stories matter to the U.S. relationship with Liberia? The U.S. must be careful of incidents that can permanently end relations with Liberia and change public support against the U.S. having a positive relationship with Liberia. A poor relationship between the former colonial power, in this example the U.S., and with Liberia can lead to instability. If there's a void in instability, it's going to be filled by something or somebody else. Distrust in the government can lead to more difficult interventions or serious incidents. The government of Liberia must be viewed as legitimate by its people, and the U.S. can facilitate this role. Now, there's some additional overarching takeaways the U.S. can use in its relationship with Liberia. The U.S. can learn significant lessons from other former colonial powers in Africa and does not need to learn lessons all on its own. Additionally, the U.S. can apply these lessons and adapt these lessons because they're already available. Thank you.